Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Simon Needle. I work for Birmingham City Council. There's some confusion, obviously, because this was supposed to be in Hornbeam Room, which obviously was just combined. And it was also down for Elspeth Sage, who works for the West Midlands Combined Authority and is their lead for the, drawing up the local nature recovery strategy. Unfortunately, she's off sick today, so I was going to be co-presenting this with her, but I'm ending up doing the whole thing. So, first few slides are hers. I have the benefit of actually being as part of the local nature recovery strategy steering group anyway, so hopefully we'll be okay on that. So how many of you are actually involved in looking at or involved in inputting into local nature recovery strategies at the moment? A few of you, okay, that's good. So for the rest of you, maybe there'll be something new. For those of you who aren't, please bear with me. Maybe you can contribute something as we go through. So this is just looking, I suppose, at recovering our nature, local nature recovery strategies. Let's see if it all works. So the local nature recovery strategies, as some of us will know, were introduced in the 2020 Environment Act as a statutory duty. They're a data-informed strategy for nature recovery. And there are 48 strategies across England, making up the nature recovery network. Now, for most areas in the UK, this is going to be led by maybe the county level authorities or a body there. For myself, where I work in Birmingham, it's the West Midlands Combined Authority that has been given the lead for that. And I think that's reflective of some of the other areas where you've got combined authorities. So they're working across the geographic region of the 7 main local authorities there. So it's going to be fun working together across all those boundaries. It's obviously following the Lawton principles of bigger, better and more joined up. And LNRs will have agreed priorities and potential actions, influence planning and land management, incorporate a wide range of views and address wider environmental goals. And as part of that, we're working as a multi partnership team. So we've got the wildlife trusts, we've got canals and rivers trusts, people like the Environment Agency, the local authorities, and also community groups as well feeding into this. So that's where we're incorporating those wider range of views, looking at how we engage with those special interest groups. So whether that be people like our West Midlands Bird Club, that could be the West Midlands fungi groups, some of the entomological groups, because they all have sets of data that maybe we see, but we don't always necessarily have the opportunity to pull all those together into one place. So that's trying to think and shape how we look at this and thinking about how we can deliver this on a landscape scale for the benefit of all. So what goes into the nature recovery strategy? So we've just covered a little bit of this. So the what. So what are we going to do? So thinking about the activities that create new habitats, woodland, grassland, wetland, improving existing habitats, supporting or reintroducing species perhaps, making cities greener and making farming more sustainable. Now, for me in Birmingham, making farming more sustainable is not a major priority for me, but when we get over the border into places like Solihull and Coventry, which are in Warwickshire, then they have obviously large areas of rural estate that are within, or rural land within their geographies as well. So that sort of feeds well into that. Where are we going to do this? So again, this is looking at places that reconnect fragmented habitats, buffer protected sites, extend those habitat corridors, the canals, the railways, and reduce green injustice. And that's feeding into some of the work that we've done in Birmingham around environmental injustice. And obviously it was picked up through a lot of those talks this morning, looking about how you, bring the benefits of nature through to those communities that are in areas of deprivation or have, least connection to the natural environment. And then we're also looking about how we can mitigate environmental risks, so flooding, heat stress and air quality, or improving air quality, should we say. The who's making it happen? Well, I think everybody has a part to play in this, whether it's big or small. That could be the land managers, everyone from farmers and governments, community centres, down to your own garden or balcony. So I think we need to think about how we can engage communities in doing their little bit for nature, whether it be within their garden spaces, how they can help at the community level in neighbourhood parks, pocket parks, through to how they might want to play a part in managing some of our larger sites as well. So whether that be picking up with existing conservation groups or whether there's friends of parks groups that we can be engaging with there. Obviously, we need to engage policymakers to set new standards. So part of my work involves working in the planning department. So I'm helping shape new planning policy going forward. So not only have we got to write things like our biodiversity net gain policies and get those out, but we're also implementing things like the urban greening factor, which I don't know whether you've heard of, which is has been used in London and in Europe for a few years. But we're trying to use that as a way of levering an additional green infrastructure into those areas that need it most. And for us in an urban environment, if we think to the likes of biodiversity net gain, you know, the mandate there is to deliver 10% over the baseline. Or for an urban city where most of our sites that are coming through for a generation are going to have a zero baseline, 10% of nothing is nothing.
I went on a brownfields development
Yeah.
done by the Geopark the other day.
Yeah.
And they pointed out, which hadn't occurred to me because I'm from Walsall, so Jackie from Walsall, we've obviously got a lot of brownfield sites.
Yeah.
Most derelict sites, it hadn't occurred to me, even
Are some of the most diverse.
Yeah, because of the nature that's on them. So actually, from a BNG point of view, we need to make sure they're assessed.
Absolutely. So I always talk about our, what I suppose what I was referring to there was our sites that are already developed rather than those that are brownfield sites, because absolutely the brownfield sites are some of our most diverse sites. And so if you go into the Black Country authorities where you're from, so you know you've got the UNESCO Geopark, which is looking at those geological formations, but you've also got the old slag heaps from the coal works, which are incredibly diverse. And it's that sort of contraplay between an agenda that pushes brownfield first, as opposed to some of the greenfield. It's a very difficult thing in an urban environment because we don't have those greenfield sites that they're perhaps low biodiversity. They might be amenity grass, or they might be lay pasture or something like that that is actually quite poor biodiversity wise. So how do we set those off? So yes, for certainly for our nature recovery strategy, those brownfield sites are going to have to be quite high up on the target there. So yes, so influencing policymakers particularly on that there, and then looking at the investors and developers as well. So who can invest in these? So you'll probably be aware we've got the local investment in natural capital program going on with the combined authorities. So that's looking at can we find people who can invest up front in some of these sites so we can make improvements to our sites that then may be able to be retailed at a later point through to developers. So we're actually making gains for nature now rather than waiting for a loss to occur. And obviously we've got the developers on there as well. So the priorities set out in the regional vision for nature recovery. So we're looking at that increase of biodiversity in urban areas, nature-based solutions, so looking at how we can use those to address things like flood risk, the air quality, the heat stress, create and maintain sustainable functioning waterways. The roads and railways support habitat corridors for nature connectivity, and particularly in an urban area, those rail lines can make quite big connections past existing urban sites, linking spaces together. So they're particularly important. So how can we increase tree cover in the region as well? So within Birmingham, we've got an urban forest master plan which sets out our vision to 2051. But how can we deliver that ambition to reach that target? Can we do that through net gain? Can we do that through other processes? And then most importantly, and as was picked up by Dr. Bird this morning, improving people's connection to nature as well. So that's, I think, a real key aspect for us that I think maybe some of the rural habitat banks are really going to miss out on, is about how will that impact all that community. Because if you've got an urban rural, you've got a rural habitat bank, it's probably could be quite biodiverse, but actually how are you having that social impact if you're taking biodiversity away from a developed area and sticking it in a location somewhere else? So there are lots of potential measures and our actions to support priorities. So thinking about that increase in biodiversity in urban areas and improving people's connection to nature. So all of these in between here will help deliver both of those. So think about creating new pocket parks, increasing local food growing opportunities, use of permeable paving to deliver driveways, managing gardens for wildlife, planting more street trees, changing or altering or reducing the mowing in parks and verges and gardens, renaturalising urban rivers and canals, and supporting green prescribing initiatives to get people out, which we are trying out. But I think that I was saying with somebody at the interval, we're finding it hard to get some of the GP surgeries to take that on board. There's lots of advice out there, but getting GPs to actually make those prescriptions is difficult. So measures are mapped where they will and where they will have the most impact. So think about where we might be needing more community projects, where we might be looking at more green infrastructure. So again, we've done lots of opportunity mapping around where there are gaps in that connectivity. That's informing where we need to be seeing new sites created to create ecological connectivity, to minimise that sort of bottlenecking that might occur on some of those linear sites. So buffering existing corridors and of course creating stepping stones So that could, so we've got that sort of that's the other principle, the more joined up and having those stepping stones that link between these high areas of high biodiversity. So our LNRS, I can't speak this afternoon, is informed by and helps support wider benefits. So we've already spoken about mapping things like air quality and flood risk and deprivation and access to nature. And these combined have created, along with a few other measures looking at things like the urban heat islands, has created a climate risk and vulnerability map. So we've got this in Birmingham at lower super output level, but the combined authority have now done this across the whole region based on the work that we started, and then now, so we've got that mapped. It shows, this is relative to the region though, so the way our map looks for Birmingham is slightly different to the regional one because the impacts are not quite the same. So you can see that there is quite low risk in three parts of Solihull and into Coventry, but you can see the really high areas of impact. Yes.
I was just going to ask, how did you measure the access to nature? Is it like the 10-minute walk? Or...
Yeah, it's using things like the ANC standards. Yeah, so they've laid that over. So looking at the, so yes, in the map that was back there, yeah, the one in the bottom corner, they've done that there. So they've used the buffers around those sites. I think that might be slightly around slightly larger sites because we have got, ours is based on the sort of slightly smaller site level as well. But yeah, but it is using like the ANC standards. Oh, going the wrong way. And of course, we're looking to reverse species loss and restore habitats. So that's a bit of a rattle through the sort of the process and the principles set out for the local nature recovery strategy. Yes, no problem.
Where do you get the data from on lost habitats and species?
On lost habitats.
Is it about replacing?
Restore habitat life. Yeah, so I mean we've got some evidence based through from our Biological Records Centre. So they've been keeping a track of habitat mapping over time. So we've got that sort of historical data. We're also looking at historical maps as well. I mean, if I was just to take, I mean, I know I'm going to talk a lot about Birmingham here, but if I take there, I can think about the fact that if I stand on one of our sites looking out northwards across the city, I look across West Heath, Druids Heath, Hyters Heath, Borsall Heath, Kings Heath, Small Heath. You know, all of these places used to be heathland. I mean, I'm not saying that it's there now, but that kind of data, that kind of sort of thoughts, think about the historical patterns. We have looked to do some heathland restoration at one of our sites in Washwood Heath as well.
So perhaps lost quite a long time.
It could be lost quite long ago, but also we're thinking about recent losses as well. So like, so you've got quite good aerial mapping that can go back a period of time. So we can think about those. We can also think about what's happened in sort of planning and development and where those expansions have occurred, and if we can see what was there. So like I said, the Record Centre help us manage some of that data around things like our local wildlife sites, think about sites that we've mapped as potential sites of interest. So those are sites where we can see there's some element of I suppose, natural vegetation on there, but we haven't got the data to say whether it's a site of importance or either locally or regionally for nature conservation, but we can see that there's something there. And of course, part of that restore habitats as well will come back to things like deculverting watercourses as well. So reconnecting those, daylighting those. So those are things that are there, but they're buried, aren't they? So how do we reconnect those?
Do you think that will realistically provide funding ways to deculvert? Because we've got culverted and piped brooks and canalised brooks.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd love to make wider, but
I
it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think for some things, I think we're probably not going to see that deculverting. But what we will get is investment in some of our other watercourses to maybe take away some of those engineered solutions to make improvements to those. There will be instances where we've deculverted. We have done a little bit of deculverting and decanalisation. But yeah, I think there are some sites, particularly in the very urban heart, where you've got that myriad of brook courses. I mean, we've got 250 miles of rivers, brooks and streams in the Birmingham geography alone. And there's quite a lot when you get to the centre, which is, you know, canalised. Just the development space that would take up is going to be huge when you start to open that out. However, we've got one site where we worked with the developers to look at the urban greening factor rather than using the biodiversity net gain metrics. They did the metrics value across the site, and a 10% uplift was going to deliver something like, you know, 1 unit, 2 habitat units. So they were meeting their 10%, but when we laid it out with the urban greening factor, and then they calculated what they were going to be doing then, thinking about the other measures, that was delivering 1600% net gain using the same factors. So I think we'll probably get significant more gains on that basis. It won't necessarily provide us lots of funding, I think, for our other sites. There will be opportunities for that, but I don't think for us, it's not the cash cow that I think some people might have thought it was going to be. So there we go. So this is just then sort of like taking a little bit out into delivery, and I think this is the bit that maybe of interest, maybe a bit more interest to some of you, and this is about how we've been looking at taking that opportunity for biodiversity net gain and a local nature recovery network into delivery. So just a quick few headlines here. So we're a city of 103 square miles, 13.5 square miles of public open space, 9.2 square miles of that is designated for nature conservation, 5.4 square miles of designated woodlands, 250 miles of rivers, brooks and streams, and then we've got the 35 miles of canals on there. So we've got quite a good green infrastructure network. There's still lots of gaps in it, particularly when you're getting down to the local level, but we're not doing too bad. We've got a City of Nature 25-year plan, which we devised as part of the Future Parks Accelerator programme, which we're now implementing, and this is following the sort of the key biophilic aims, but we're looking at how we're delivering access for all, proximity to nature, reduce climate risk, having sites that are adaptive, climate resilient, reducing urban heat island effect, reducing flood risk, looking at the biodiversity net gain, the community involvement and stewardship, but also that increased external and local investment opportunities, so providing local green jobs and green businesses. So this is how we're thinking about how can we tie all this together to help sort of deliver on what we need. We've done taking that previous map, we've worked with the Wildlife Trust to sort of set out where our key habitat zones are, our core habitat network is, where the sort of the expansion zones are, and then thinking about how we go beyond that. So looking at mapping our sites. So this is primarily the green infrastructure that is already there. The sort of the mid-green colours are the sort of opportunities for expansion or for enhancement. The little spots that you probably look black on there that say that align with Nature Recovery Network Core Expansion Zone 2, that's things like our park sites that are separated out from those ecological corridors, but they provide the opportunity for stepping stones to link those sites of greater habitat importance together. We've also looked at overlaying the Nature Recovery Network with all of that climate risk and vulnerability data as well, so we can see the opportunities within there, looking at opportunities and gaps in provision and where we might want to be creating interventions to create a more localised connection to nature. So that's probably stuff that will be funded through investment in natural capital programmes or through urban greening factor rather than biodiversity net gain. But it'll all add to that overall picture. Influencing the policy, so we've got our Future City Plan, Central Birmingham 2040 framework, which the graphics give us a nice post-apocalyptic view of Birmingham with trees everywhere. But this is the sort of this is the destination that the city's taking. It's being driven by things like the City of Nature Plan, by legislation, by the need and want from the community. So looking at doubling the amount of green space to 30% within our city centres, that's the core central area by 2040. This is the aspiration that we have, and again, like we said, we're mentioning bringing in the urban greening factor, which sort of gives a more formulaic approach to delivering green infrastructure. So hopefully we'll get some perhaps more measurable benefits from that than we would do just by giving them a sort of brief design guide. This is a bit more sort of, I suppose, calculatable for them. And then if we move on to net gain, so this is one of our sites. This is actually on the fringe of the city. This is called Hilltop Manwoods Open Space, and it's what we're sort of using at the moment to push forward with an example for biodiversity net gain. So overall, the site is 57 hectares in size, and it's a mix of open meadows, which you can probably see in the small picture in the top left-hand corner. Those are cut and collected on an annual basis. They're currently under a higher level stewardship agreement for managing the grassland. But we've got hedgerows and woodland on that site as well, and some scrub. There's a little part of a traditional orchard from when it was the old farm estates that were there. But if we're thinking about, so what we've done is we've had the whole site mapped using UK HAB, which is the standard for assessing sites for biodiversity net gain baseline sort of thing. So you have your site mapped as under UK HAB. That gets converted into the statutory metrics that are on the Gov.uk webpage, and out from that you can derive a total number of habitat units that site already has, because you're looking at the current condition. We've looked at what we could do in terms to create an uplift in habitat quality. So taking those meadows from maybe poor quality to moderate or moderate to good, the same we could look at with the woodlands, the ponds, the networks, the brook courses that are on there as well. And overall, just looking at the broader habitat units, we've got, we can derive about 105 habitat unit uplift. So at the moment, we currently spend about, I think it's about £8,000 per annum on general grounds maintenance issues. So that's things like mowing out desire lines, doing litter picking, some of the sort of ad hoc tree works that we need doing for site safety. So part of our cyclical tree works regime. A little bit of invasive species treatment on there. And then we've also factored in a little bit of things like, you know, replacing locks and things like that on gates when those get broken into. The management of the meadows, though, that's, like I say, funded through the high level stewardship. That again costs around, well, we get about £8,000 a year, I think it is, for that management, for cutting as hay. So if we said a total of £16,000 we're investing in that site each year. Now, our general grounds maintenance budget is coming from the general fund, so that's always at risk. The high level stewardship, well, who knows how long that's going to continue, but there's an opportunity there's a potential, there's always a potential that may go in time. So looking at this, if we said that on the open market, a habitat unit might achieve, say, £25,000, if you were to sell that as an opportunity for delivering off-site net gain, 105 units times 25,000 would total £2.625 million. Now, if we were to think about the fact that net gain has to be delivered over the course of 30 years, we divide that back down. In theory, that gives us an annual management sum, if we were to sell everything in one go, of £87,500. So that's significantly more than we're currently spending on that site. Now, I know our maintenance budgets would go up because we'd be having to implement specific measures. We'd be bringing into management things that aren't there. But there is still an opportunity, though, for, if we were to highlight this as a habitat bank, to actually deliver some operational surplus, which could be invested in other sites to start to create that uplift going forward. So we're looking at how we can create this initial investment in order to be able to get to that point. Yes.
Isn't there a problem, or how are you overcoming the problem with them being your sites?
There is a problem with that, yes. And as those of you know have heard about Birmingham, we are in a bit of a sticky situation with a Section 114 notice, which does mean that the appetite for things like a special purpose vehicle is not necessarily there, but there are other options. So we're looking at potentials for, not necessarily in the way of banking this up front, but a way of securing income on against these sites, or securing funding against these sites. So reciprocal 101, Section 106 agreements. So where did you say you were from? You said Warsaw. So you're from Warsaw. So we're talking. So we're talking with Sandwell at the moment about having a reciprocal Section 106. They've got sites they need to bring forward. We've got sites we want to bring forward. There are developments occurring that are looking to deliver off-site net gain at the moment. This could be a way that we do that. So Sandwell signs the Section 106 with the developer in Birmingham, secures the funding, that gets commission back, and vice versa. Bit of work. Obviously, we'll be pushing the combined authority to become a responsible body and actually act as a broker across the region. So I think that's probably a more economic way than actually each of us setting up our own special purpose vehicles, because each of those will require its own governance and financial procedures, which at a local authority level can be quite difficult. Yeah. Or the other option then is that we look to say, we've broached this previously, but do we look at something like a Parks Foundation or some kind of charitable trust that's created to take up that role as that broker? So yes, it's difficult, but I think we can start to see, when we start multiplying this out by the range of sites that we've got, the opportunities that are there. The fact that this one site alone can generate that level, it's a big site, it's all in one block, that makes it convenient. It's going to be more difficult when we look at our smaller sites, but we have got things like some of our country parks, they're 450 acres. We've got some linear corridors that could deliver quite significantly because they're sort of like 7-8 miles long. So you've got a collection of sites. It's about how I think we look to conglomerate these and deliver on those opportunities. I've said more than enough. So is there anything else anybody wants to ask, question, discuss?
Just another benefit of that is that one of the dangers with BNG is that you end up with a situation where developers, although the metric tries to avoid it, opt for off-site BNG.
Mhm.
And so you could end up with situations where urban communities
Exactly.
have all the disbenefits of having
Mhm.
development
Mhm.
and none of the benefits because that's happening out
Yeah.
in more
Yeah,
rural
yeah.
areas.
And I think that's why, you know, we've particularly been keen on introducing the urban greening factor in tandem, because then we're setting, this is like a minimum standard that we're expecting. And obviously, you know, we're saying this, but you've put it in the Natural England Green Infrastructure Standards, you know, document. I know I didn't have a discussion with you, but you know, we were involved in that discussion about what does a measure around tree canopy look like, what does the measure around accessible green space look like, how do we deliver that? So that's, you know, so it's good to see that it's in there, as well as the fact that we were implementing it as well, trying to implement it as well. So that sets one threshold, but I don't think it should be an either or. It's a, yeah, and I think actually this does mean that unfortunately they may be able to deliver more of the net gain on site than they might have been able to. So we are going to have to look at those other markets. But having said that, if there's a growing market and there's a demand, you know, maybe there's the opportunity that, you know, within, you know, if somebody, I don't know, if somebody needs to create some heathland, for example, highly unlikely, but we probably would be looking over to Warsaw to say, actually, you've got the opportunity through your Purple Horizons programme. Is there some way that actually we could link with there? But maybe vice versa. Sandwell itself is quite confined. So maybe there's an opportunity that actually it brings it over into maybe the Birmingham boundary. I think our desire would be that we don't see the loss within the city, but then if we are seeing the loss within the city, can we go to the neighbouring authority and out? I think the risk, as we're seeing at the moment, that we are seeing things like, let's go to the Habitat Bank in Durham or to the one in Malvern, which actually removes it not only outside the LPA, the combined authority, it moves it outside of the natural character areas as well. So it's significantly far away. Stunned silence or any other questions? I don't know how long I've got actually, because I'll rattle through that. Yeah. Oh, go the other way. So the urban greening factor, if you look upon the Natural England webpage, they've got their green infrastructure
Green infrastructure
portal. Yes.
Yeah.
And-
Green infrastructure
Portal.
portal. And there's things like there's the GI mapping
Mhm.
tool that they can use for lots of information, things like the indices of multiple deprivation. But there's a whole section on the urban greening factor. And it's basically a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And you put your numbers in terms of what you know, the final landscape design, and you're aiming to reach a certain proportion.
Yeah.
I think it's
So yeah. So
0.4 for residential, 0.3 for
yeah.
commercial.
So I think this is what I say. I think at its most basic, a way to interpret that is to sort of say, if you had a development site with a footprint of 100 square meters and you were looking at something like a 0.3 factor, then on its most basic form, you'd be saying, well, actually 30% of that should be green infrastructure. And that could be ground level interventions, that could be green walls, green roofs, etc. However, that might not necessarily be the case, because what it also does is it incentivizes multifunctional green infrastructure. So it's no good just putting, 5 square meters of amenity grass down. That's no good. That won't score you very highly. So you'd have to put significantly more green infrastructure in like that than you would do if you made that something like a species-rich lawn, or it was functioning as a SUDS system. And the same with tree planting again. So we see lots of tree planting that goes in, in inadequate rooting volume. So we've set specific thresholds that in our design guide that says trees should be in X, Y, Z rooting volume depending on the size. This does exactly the same. So a tree in an inadequate rooting volume doesn't score as highly as one that has a significant amount of rooting volume or a designed tree pit for it.
So this is your policy rather than Natural England?
It's basically what we'd already started to put it in, but actually what we did do is we've just adopted the values, so that the scoring values from the Natural England one. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Say it's Natural England, therefore.
Yeah. So we started off with the one that was in the London GLA's urban greening factor. And I think that, to be honest, they're probably not far off those original scorings on the Natural England one. So we started off with that. We said we might as well just use there's no point us devising our own scoring system, our own sort of scores for each type of infrastructure. Just use the one.
Have all the tree stuff as well that you've come up with as well as that? Or is it not that detailed?
No, if you go into the GI portal, because there's the 5 headline standards.
Yeah.
So the one about having a green infrastructure strategy,
Mhm.
which fits into things like nature towns and cities and the
Yeah.
conversation. The accessible green space standards, urban greening factor, urban tree canopy cover is another one.
Mhm.
So there's details of that on there. And then the last one, close to my heart, is the urban nature recovery standard. And that talks about doing a bit of an assessment and looking at the amount in which you can uplift the amount of land that is managed with nature recovery as one of the primary aims.
Can I also just point you in the direction, if you've not heard of them before, the Trees and Design Action Group, so TDAG. So there's a whole series of first steps guides in there. This is first step guides to air quality, to urban green infrastructure, to trees in the built environment, which sets a lot of that out. So that's stuff that's been done by the national TDAG group, but with support from people like myself and other colleagues, and the University of Birmingham tend to do a lot of the writing of the text along with the TDAG group. So it's actually somebody from an engineering background who helps with that, who co-runs the TDAG group. So
The same values probably, but does it cover green roofs? Because I know there was criticism again about green roofs with it just being like Sedum, that it's losing most of what it could be with your...
yeah.
The way the urban greening factor works is you've got 20-something different land class.
Yeah, and yes, and Sedum roof does score lower, doesn't it, than a more diverse. Yeah.
So you get different weighting, and what we found is that working with developers, it starts that conversation because they quite like it because it's literally, it's a spreadsheet. You feed in your numbers, you see what result you get, and then you can start the conversation about, well, if you replaced that with something that delivers more weighting, then you're increasing the score, and I think they quite like that they can see sort of how their decisions are going to have an impact.
I mean, again, we've put stuff like that in. We produced a design guide for planning where we put that kind of information in. We've been quite upfront with saying, in our initial comments, we will not accept just a Sedum blanket roof in those in a lot of situations. Occasionally, we have to, go, well, actually, that's just what it's going to be. But yeah, where we can really push back, we do.